Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia. As we turn the page on 2020 and head into 2021, I hope everyone's having a safe and happy holiday seasons. Here on the channel, we're celebrating this with a 12 Days of Christmas special featuring 12 separate top 5 lists related to the game Total War 3 Kingdoms. And after looking at different ways to improve the game in terms of gameplay in the first 6 days of our special, the final 6 days here will be focused on characters, as we will turn to list out the top 5 characters from each of the major factions that could use an upgrade in terms of artwork. And for today's video, we'll be focusing on the faction of Shu. So to kick off our list, we have at number 5, Liao Hua. So Liao Hua is currently a yellow turban character in the game, and that's mainly because in the Romance of Three Kingdoms, the novel, he was portrayed as a yellow turban general who later on to surrender to Liu Bei and worked under Guan Yu. But this, unfortunately, is very far from history and something that could be fixed in-game. Liao Hua, it turns out, comes from a regular family, never joined the Yellow Turban, and he did work under Guan Yu. And he worked under Guan Yu for a long time, until Guan Yu's death at the hand of Wu, where Liao Hua instead joined faction of Wu as one of these captured generals, where he would go on to fake his death in order to return back to Shu. And when he returned back to Shu, he continued to be a general for them all the way till the end of Shu. He lived till 264, and it was during the migration when many of the generals of Shu were told to move to Luoyang to live. That's when he died of old age on the trip. So Liao Hua served for a long time for the Kingdom of Shu, and he definitely deserves a place. And because he served for so long, if the game creates a unique artwork for him, players will be able to use him for a long stretch of the game, from the very beginning to maybe the very end. So that's a nice touch, and here we see his artwork used in various different games: Dynasty Warriors, Sanguosha, which is a card game, a mafia-style card game that's very popular in China, based on the Three Kingdoms period. And lastly, we have him portrayed by the Romance of Three Kingdoms, another very popular game for the Three Kingdoms period. So Liao Hua is someone that we would love to see. And then in the number 4 slot, we have Ma Dai. So Ma Dai would be a great character to add into the game because he would work for multiple factions, namely Ma Teng's faction in the beginning, as he is Ma Teng's nephew and Ma Chao's cousin. And later on, he would go on with his older cousin Ma Chao to serve under Zhang Lu for a period of time before they were chased out, and then they joined Liu Bei. And after Ma Chao's death, Ma Dai became the key figure representing the Liang faction within Liu Bei's group, and he served in the Southern Expedition as well as the Northern Expedition, and he received some very high rank, inheriting what Ma Chao had, and he was a very important general in that aspect. And right now he is in the game. He is a generic vanguard in the game. We have used him in a few of our campaigns, and you can see his art in Dynasty Warrior 9 as well as Sanguosha, the card game that we mentioned earlier. And I think he can continue to be a vanguard. That seems to be the thing with everyone in Ma Teng's family. Ma Teng's a vanguard, Ma Tie, Ma Xiu, Ma Chao, all vanguards. So seeing Ma Dai as a vanguard will work quite nicely. And he does play a significant role in that he eventually will be the one to kill off Wei Yan after Zhuge Liang's death, as Zhuge Liang's death left a power vacuum. And Ma Dai's action in eliminating one of those ambitious, power-hungry generals in Wei Yan would help smooth the transition period for the Kingdom of Shu after Zhuge Liang's death. So Ma Dai definitely has a key role to play in history, and I would love to see him get his own art in the game. Then moving on to the number 3 slot, we're going to include a lady here. There is going to be one girl in every single one of our list here until the last day, where we have an entire list of female characters who needs to be in the game. Now obviously if Huang Yueying, who is the wife of Zhuge Liang, is listed here, we're not going to list her again in the top 5 female list. But most likely, since they are important enough to be listed under a major faction, they're probably ranking even higher than that top 5 female list that we're going to cover in the future. But regardless, Huang Yueying, as I said, is the wife of Zhuge Liang, and she was popularized by the game Dynasty Warrior when she was featured, and this name, Yueying, is made up by Dynasty Warriors. Historically, many females, almost 90% of females in this period, did not have their birth name recorded down by history, so it's lost to time, and they're only referred to by their surname. So she would be Lady Huang, and that's the reason why so many female characters in the game are called Lady Blank, Lady Liu, Lady Yan, Lady Gan, Lady Mi, and that's because they didn't have their name recorded down, so the game is not going to make up a name for them. But nothing stops Dynasty Warriors, as she was given the name Huang Yueying, and it stuck. It's very influential what they did in terms of Three Kingdom genre, and you can see that the last two pictures here on the right are both depictions of her in Sanguosha, the card game. That game has multiple skins for their cards as well, and the one on the far right is kind of her typical image with some sort of face cover. I think this was also popularized by Dynasty Warrior in the early variations of her artwork, where she was kind of hooded and hidden. And the reason why she was hidden is because historically her father depicted her as an ugly girl with hair that was turning yellow, whereas black hair would be a healthy hair color for Chinese people, obviously, and her skin is more darkish, whereas the general consensus for beauty for Asian cultures, or at least Chinese cultures, let's just say Chinese cultures, tend to be more on the white side. So for Huang Yueying, she was depicted as not so pretty, and the reason why her father was kind of mean and said this is because he was trying to discourage Zhuge Liang from marrying her, as Zhuge Liang proposed to her father, and her father kind of gave that description to discourage the young man. But Zhuge Liang saw that Huang Yueying was very famous for her talent and her smarts and wanted to marry her. But in reality, I would think Zhuge Liang is finding himself a very good marriage in terms of family status, because Zhuge Liang, if you think about it, comes from a family that are refugees. They came from the Shandong province, I believe Langya, and they escaped all the way to the Jin province to hide from war. He was raised by an uncle, which means his parents are dead, which is not a good thing in terms of proposing marriages, because you're basically orphaned and taken care of by your uncle. And then you approach a family like the Huang clan, who is very powerful in the Jin region. Remember Huangzu. But Huangzu is more of a general and more of a brute. Huang Yueying's father, Huang Chengmiao, I believe, I kind of can't recall his name, but his clan has very interesting marriages. Huang Chengmiao married Lady Cai, and this Lady Cai is the older sister of Liu Biao's wife, Lady Cai. And their aunt, Lady Cai's aunt, as in, married Zhang Wen, who is the Grand Excellency during the early periods of the Three Kingdom. So the Cai clan is very well connected, had multiple daughters married the right places. Cai Mao, the character who is the vassal alongside Huangzu in the game, his father's sister, or his aunt, is the one married to Zhang Wen, the Grand Excellency in the imperial court. So that's where their family gets power. And Cai Mao has two sisters. Cai Mao's older sister married Huang Yueying's dad and Huang Yueying's mother, and Cai Mao's younger sister married Liu Biao. So you can see where Zhuge Liang fits in the Jin province if he can secure a marriage with Huang Yueying. So regardless, these two are married, happily married as far as we can know in history, and she's depicted as very smart and also kind of an inventor, similar to what Zhuge Liang is. And if anyone's gonna get a character artwork in terms of female characters in the Kingdom of Shu, she would definitely be on top of my list just to create an interesting character, even though historically speaking we have the likes of Lady Mi, who is already currently in the game, and you also could make Lady Gan, which is Liu Bei's other wife, as well as the option of making Zhang Fei's daughter, who eventually would become the Empress of Shu. Those are all good choices, but in terms of being an independent general on the field, I think Huang Yueying would be the best one to use, as she pairs nicely with Zhuge Liang. And since we did bring up empresses, let's bring up emperor as we move on to the fourth character on our list here, or technically number 2 on our list, because we're counting down in terms of their importance to the kingdom of Shu, and we can't have the kingdom Shu without the emperor, Liu Shan. And this would obviously be the oldest son of Liu Bei, and the only son of Liu Bei, as he would go on to become the second emperor of Shu after the death of his father. This is the same kid that Zhao Yun rescued during the Battle of Changban, and he will grow up to become this emperor that's depicted very poorly in different games. You can see his Dynasty Warrior 9 outfit is actually probably the best he's ever been depicted as a fine young kid, whereas Sun Guosha tend to have him as a goofy child and a bit obese, interested in only the playthings of life. And even the Romance of the Three Kingdoms novel didn't depict him quite well, as he was often scapegoated as the reason that Zhuge Liang failed in many of his expeditions. And he would go on to live quite a long life, as even after the fall of the kingdom of Shu, he would surrender to the Cao Wei regime, or at that time it would be the Jin regime, and he would go on to live as a vassal, as one of those title lord without any power, but enjoy the rest of his days living out his time. And one of the most well-known sayings of the time, 乐不思蜀, means the enjoyment here makes me not remember Shu, is something that he used to kind of keep himself safe during his time as a vassal, or essentially a hostage. But I think historically he did quite well for the situation. He's a surrendered emperor, and he was able to ensure not only his safety, but also the safety of those who he used to rule, because he was able to secure good policies for his people back in Shu, even though he himself was kind of in the role of a hostage, living out the rest of his days under the Cao Wei regime and eventually the Jin regime. And then finally, for the top of our list here, for the generals of Shu that could use a nice new artwork, we have Jiang Wei. And Jiang Wei is probably the last major general who is not given an artwork in the Kingdom of Shu, as Kingdom of Shu doesn't have a lot of characters to begin with. It's not like the Kingdom of Wei, with so many talented officers, or the Kingdom of Wu, with multiple lesser known but very well named generals. Shu seems to have a concentration of elite group of generals, and they're already represented in the game, whether that's the 5 tiger generals, that's Guan Yu, Zhang Fei, Zhao Yun, Huang Zhong, Ma Chao, or you have Wei Yan, which got a skin recently. So all these very talented, very skilled generals are already depicted for the Kingdom of Shu, and the only one that's really left is Jiang Wei. Jiang Wei was originally a general serving in the Kingdom of Wei. His family comes from the northwest region. He was just a very low-tier lieutenant in the Tianshui commandery, way out west. And during one of Zhuge Liang's northern expeditions quite early on, he was abandoned by the local administrator, as the administrator fled, and there was a sense of distrust with Jiang Wei, so they locked the door on him, and he couldn't get back into the city to retreat. So he was put in a pickle, and he ended up surrendering to Zhuge Liang. And Zhuge Liang saw a lot of talent in him, as Jiang Wei was very well raised and had a lot of good teachers in his youth. There was a lot of northwestern generals from the early periods of the Three Kingdoms, and even before that, who did a lot of the Liang Rebellion efforts. And after they retired, they went back to this region in terms of Tianshui, and they did schools and they taught. So people like Wang Fusong's family, people like Chen Xuan's family, they taught a lot of scholars in this region, and Jiang Wei was one of those kids who received the benefit of this education, and Zhuge Liang saw that in him. And because Jiang Wei is from this region, he had a really good relationship with the Qiang people as well as other nomadic tribes in this region. And during the later stages of the Three Kingdoms, there were major Qiang tribes that surrendered to Shu and defected from Wei. So Jiang Wei played a key role in that as well. But he's often depicted as the successor to Zhuge Liang, as he would lead multiple northern expeditions after Zhuge Liang's death. So you can see his artwork, especially in Sun Guosha, which is the artwork on the right there. You see that he has a fan, which is what Zhuge Liang used. but he is probably more of a military general than a strategist like Zhuge Liang. So I would like to see him being made as something that's not a strategist in the game. Maybe a champion, which is the typical green color associated with the Kingdom of Shu, which is something that CA seems to be moving towards as we're getting this realignment that Wu is red and we have so many vanguards. Cao Cao is going to be blue. You're going to have a lot of strategists. And then hopefully Shu here is going to be green. And then we're going to get a lot of champions. And champions kind of lacking in the game right now because I feel like most of the new additions into the game are either strategists or vanguards. And there's often a lack of good quality champions. And the last one that we really saw added to the game would be Wei Yan, which is a Shu general. So hopefully we'll see that with Jiang Wei. And this is going to wrap up our top 5 list here. Just some quick artwork to get you guys inspired. We're going to move on to the Kingdom of Wei next, which is going to be very difficult as they could use a lot of characters. So see you then. Bye.